I've spent the last few days basically in all of my free time nonstop reading every file I can get my eyes onto from the latest release of the Epstein files, so-called Epstein files. And it's really hard to know what to make of it all because it's such a large moment and points to such a large series of problems. I've talked a bit in the past on this podcast about how every now and then in history, there are moments that are like lightning flashes where you just get a moment from a crisis or a scandal or something where you get a sudden flash of the truth through the darkness and you get to see the landscape, but then everything's dark again as it was before. And you kind of have to infer from the information that you get in those lightning flashes what the landscape is like all the time. And this very much feels like one of those to me because uh, the breadth and depth of things that are both implicit and explicit from these files is astonishing. And it's kind of like an everything problem in that it touches so many of our collective understandings of reality, how the world is, how our institutions are, how society works, how people work. I mean, the list goes on. That's kind of what I want to explore here. Just to let you know up front that I'm not going to be going into the particularly horrible elements of the stuff that is uncovered in those files. And I'm not going to be going too much into the specifics of what certain interactions might mean in terms of criminal culpability or criminal acts or things like that. That's all there for you to see. There are a lot of analysts that are going through it all with more time than me and with more energy and better brains for it. That are scouring all of the narratives and piecing together all the implications. This instead is something that I haven't seen done well, at least, which is an attempt at a meta-narrative analysis of what is the implication of this type of information being out there? What does it say about our society, where our society is going, what our institutions are, what legitimacy is, and under the umbrella that there's a kind of decay of everything that's strongly witnessable in this. Because while you could accurately make the case that this stuff has been going on forever, and it may be realistic to say that will continue to go on forever, the way in which it's intersecting with so many of our current systems and perceptions of reality points to a crisis in that something's going to give way somewhere. I can only guess at what that will be at what point. But despite being 3 million files that have been released in this tranche by the Department of Justice, I think it's really important to remember that what we're seeing are not the actions of one person or two people, the only two people to be charged, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And nor does it belie just a criminal network involving a group of elite people that like to get together and break the law. The way in which these cases and the evidence that's held by the Department of Justice and the information that's collectively held by human systems of authority portrays a far larger rot. And even though it all occurs above our heads, we do interrelate to it and have both a responsibility for its creation in a minor way for individuals, of course, and for its correction. That's maybe a bit abstract or esoteric, but I'll get into more specifics on the other side. And again, just in case you're concerned about the content of these files coming out, I'm not interested in sharing any of the horrible stuff. You can go find that at your own leisure if you're curious about it. Just going to be taking a journey instead through what the existence of this case and how it has been treated or not treated, as is perhaps more relevant. What does it say about where we are in our systems of society and how we interact with them, and what do we do with all of that? It's a bold plan, but I'm a bold guy. Courtesy of the hard work of Congressman Chris Massey and Congressman Ro Khanna, a Republican and a Democrat, there was a bipartisan bill that went through Congress and eventually signed by the president, which required the Department of Justice to release all of its investigations into Jeffrey Epstein in one searchable database. And this was supposed to have been done by last year, but it was a bit late and it came out last week. And it's a tranche of 3 million documents, emails, case notes, images, videos, which paint a picture of everything that the FBI, which is part of the Department of Justice, is looking into in trying to unravel the extent of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and those to which he's networked. And it's a great gift that they've given us because all of this evidence was being sat on under the claim that to release it would be to disrupt justice processes or to muddy the waters of the political branch and the judiciary, which is, of course, fair enough. But now that it's out, it's very clear that there's a huge network of criminals, and in everything from small individual level crimes to at scale treason and espionage and those sorts of dramas that have not been investigated adequately, let alone prosecuted. And it raises so many questions about the nature of our society and the things that we see. Because even just getting these files out was a struggle. And the political dance that was played around it, I mean, again, they weren't released at all under the Biden presidency. And then Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, who has oversight of the Department of Justice, was dithering and then back and forth. I mean, she said at one point last year, I've got the files, they're sitting on my desk, I'll release them. Then she didn't. Then she was bound by this bill by Congress, by law, to have to release them. And she did. But even then, there was dithering and redactions. And even though there are over 3 million documents as part of this release, there were 3 million that were withheld entirely. And those ones that are released are pretty heavily redacted. And those redactions are statedly withheld to protect the identity of victims and to protect ongoing cases. But it's pretty spurious because there are so many instances where you see someone send an email, something like, hey, let's commit a crime together, and the sender will be redacted. And there are other instances where the redaction is so poor quality that internet sleuths have been able to figure out what the lettering around the redaction indicates. And it's not someone who's under investigation. It's not someone who's a victim. So I think it's a pretty fair accusation to make that there are political redactions and sort of damage management redactions, which is, of course, already really ugly. But the whole process has been really ugly. And furthermore, as large as this tranche is and the stuff that it covers, and I'll go into that in a minute, it is just a tiny pixel of what's occurring, even in this realm, because it's, as I said, they've only released half of the stuff. They've held back half of the stuff. Who knows what's in that, how incriminating that is, particularly for the administration itself or just the general US state and its apparatus. But also, the Department of Justice is just one realm of players that can be looking into this. And I think it's pretty clear, given the obvious connections that Jeffrey Epstein, from what is known, publicly has to figures in other states and his operations across states and with other leaders, that there would be some affiliation with the CIA in terms of investigations if he's not a direct employee or asset. Because, as I'm sure you know, the FBI is responsible for internal investigations and the CIA international interests of the US. And none of this is covered by that. That would require a totally different bill and totally different investigations. So who knows how much more there is to come. But yes, so it's like the fossil record in that sense. We think we know all these species existed then, but actually we only have the species that happened to be captured in a mud lake at a particular time. And so there could be millions and millions. There would have been millions and millions of things that we'll just never know about. But it kind of gives you a picture. And in the same way, yes, that's what's happening here. Yes, the Epstein files, in a nutshell, paint a very strong picture of an ugly world of elites that are committing crimes with impunity and contempt, but also throwing around their money and weight to increase their power. I mean, none of that stuff is surprising. And maybe that's the first point to make. Reading through it all, and if you've got the time to do this, then great. Maybe you'll have the same reflection. None of it is surprising, which is such a dark thing to think. Because we all have, stereotypical ideas of what people with power who are attracted to it and pursue it and get it and use it are like. That sort of thin slice of the population, the 2% or whatever it is, that's sociopathic or psychopathic and happy to do anything for their own interests. Like, of course, they're the people that are attracted to those positions. And then, of course, once in those positions, they're not wielding them with the mandates and accountability that you or I might. They're wielding them to further their own power, and of course their social ideas of what's fun to do are different from most of us, and their capacity to do certain things are different from most of us. I don't want to pretend that we're so different either. I think that if you were to take 3 million documents and investigate anybody's life and their full network of friends and everybody they know, and the crimes that are occurring in their circles and the mistreatments or whatever, like the suite of humanity exists. So in that sense, elements of it aren't surprising, but what is shocking, and not shocking in the sense of surprising so much as really stark from all of this, is how brazen that behavior is against a backdrop of not only no accountability, but active obfuscation. Because these crimes were known and knowable for so long by so many who are so implicated. that the fact that there have been no real prosecutions surrounding the depth of them, because a reminder, even Jeffrey Epstein was only charged for soliciting prostitution and soliciting sex with a minor, which are seemingly just a small fraction of the number of crimes that he committed. And then he was sentenced for 10 months in prison or something like that. I mean, he was subsequently charged a decade later, but died in prison. Also, they would have you believe. Because just him and Ghislaine Maxwell, who's also in jail for sex trafficking of a minor, they're the only two people to face any criminal culpability for what clearly appears to be a large network. So the fact that everyone associated with this has been protected by both sides of American politics and by all the arms, the investigative and sanctioning arms of the law authorities is kind of hard to believe. It feels like as you encounter it that you're living in a duality, because I know that if I went to the local shops and stole an iPhone, like I could be facing jail for that and that I wouldn't get away with it. The stuff that these people are getting away with it makes the hair fall out of your head. And they're not just getting away with it in the sense that nobody notices. Once they've been noticed, it appears very much like there's been active obfuscations from kind of all the apparatus of authority in our society to mask for that. And for me, this is the big story. I mean, because if we think about scandals in the past, what are the biggest scandals? Watergate, Bill Clinton having an affair, Prince Charles having an affair, Bob Hawke everyone seemingly having affairs. Major instances of corruption come to mind, but none of it. It all just pales into nothing against the extent of the activities that are occurring here. And it's hard to map them all. And I'm trying really hard not to get sucked into talking about specific cases because it betrays the enormity and the importance of what the overall picture is that's painted. Because any one individual pixel or story is so large that it could or should end careers and rock systems and demand inquiries and result in a reconstruction of how we do law enforcement or legislation or whatever it might be. And we're kind of only seeing just the fringes of the rug of that occurring. And even then, it's quite extreme. I mean, Lord Mandelson, former Lord by now maybe, he was the first Secretary of State in the UK. And he in that role was leaking stuff directly from the cabinet, decisions that they were going to make that would allow you to make a lot of money as an investor or avoid losing a lot of money, but also giving advice on how to lobby his own government to change policy and things like that. It's just, that on its own is a huge scandal and is being treated as a huge scandal in the UK. But you add that to equivalent versions. He's got a cozy relationship with Emmanuel Macron, who's asking him for advice seemingly on how to structure his policies and things like that. This is before he's president even. He's described as friends with Kevin Rudd by a mutual friend who's in Norway. And just the sort of breadth of this type of network and the nature of it can only leave you scratching your head thinking, oh, well, why would one New York financier, who even knows how he got his money, that's another topic, how can he have the influence behind closed doors for the democratically elected leaders of totally foreign countries? And then when you add in the mix that there's clearly nefarious activities and rules and laws subverting sexual behavior and who knows what else occurring across his networked realm, because it's not just the island. He also has a ranch and an apartment, I think he's got the largest apartment in Manhattan, which, by the way, there's footage of Paul Keating's daughter leaving with him. They look like they're sneaking off when she was in her late 20s. Yeah, it's just, if this is information you do get, well, what do you project out the meaning of all of it to be? That in its own is the first thing that's shocking about it, the scale and depth and nature of whatever the beast is that's operating in this realm and what its functions are. But the other shocking element, and again, shocking as in impactful rather than necessarily surprising, is how little space is being given into our purported systems of governance and discourse and investigation into the nature of that. Because the headlines that I see are Elon Musk is in the Epstein files, or Bill Gates got an STD in the Epstein files, and all these things. And it's kind of like looking at Adolf Hitler's entire career and saying, oh, Hitler was late on a repayment for a car. Like, okay, that's not the story. Like, why is that the story? There's something much larger occurring here. And you kind of feel insane for looking at it all and not seeing that mirrored in the discourse. Fortunately, there's any number of people and, senior journalists that are not affiliated with publications in particular that have looking at this and doing their best work. And the collective sort of hive mind is doing a lot of unpacking of what's occurring. I mean, look, I'll just right now go to the mainstream, sorry to be one of those mainstream media people, but yeah, ABC. What's ABC in this realm in which I think this is the largest scandal that's erupted in my lifetime, and perhaps the most shocking, one of those lightning flashes of events to occur. It's akin to something that I can't even compare it to. I mean, it kind of reminds me of Procopius writing about Justinian, whatever. Sorry for all you Byzantine heads out there. I'm not going to go into that further, but it's so shocking because I think it really pictures the rot at the heart of our society, our civilization. And it's, the headlines are not that. Okay, abc.net.au/news. Number one story. Oh my God, I can't even believe it. FOI reveals how Communications Minister Annika Wells and her staffer ended up paying $7,000 more than their initial booking due to last-minute changes. We're talking about $7,000 of an Australian minister. That's the lead article on abc.net.au while all this is breaking. All right. Okay, we'll get out of the public broadcaster. Number one on the Age at the moment. Headline, Council votes to fight 7,000 home plan for historic Melbourne defence site. Great. So we've got a story about the council fighting a developer. Okay. We'll go a bit further afield. BBC News, leading article, Russian attacks on Ukraine energy sites particularly depraved, UK PM says. Yeah, I mean, like they are. But also, they've been going on every day for at least the last month in their current rate, and they've been occurring in some form or another for years now. That, not to say that's not big news, but it's not comparable to the crisis that they're facing at the moment, where they have a prince who's been stripped of his title, who has been, at the very least, having sex with people underage, and at worst, well, I mean, I don't even want to go into it. And also, they're having the man that their current prime minister appointed as the ambassador to the US be basically outed as an entire shill of a power network that has nothing to do with the UK, and taking actions to betray that mandate. The lead article is, of course, about something that someone else is doing wrong. All right, let's go further afield. CNN. We're in America, at least. It's their society. All right, the lead article is an Epstein one. A reckoning for Epstein's circle of influence. Geez, you think. Analysis. Some of Epstein's contacts are undergoing a period of public reflection. It could have political implications. Epstein's contacts are undergoing a period of public reflection. That is the softest way to say X person has been caught soliciting sex with minors. It could have political implications. I mean, I would fucking hope so. Like, and this is the point I want to come to on this whole topic, is that there's that saying, you can shear a sheep many times, but you can only skin it once. And I feel like that's what's occurring in terms of all of our institutions and the ruling class, I suppose, to use a lazy term, because there's a reality that we're being confronted with that we can see. I mean, the files are searchable. You can go and look at them yourself. You can see exactly what's occurring with certain nefarious figures and organizations, and the brazenness with which they're committing some of the most horrible and extreme crimes. To see that on the one hand, and then to not see that mirrored in even arrests or even public repudiations. I mean, almost all these people still hold their very senior offices. Again, the reason I'm not going into the specifics of it is because there are so many across any type of institution you could name. Just I'll paint the picture by doing the rounds of the few resignations I have heard of. The Swedish head of, I think, the UNHCR over there, she's resigned due to her connection. The foreign advisor to the Prime Minister's office in Slovakia, he's resigned. And former Lord Mandelson has resigned from Parliament. And there have been letters of apology from longevity experts and other scientists. And all of them say the same thing. I had no idea the depth of what was occurring. I met him in this context and I didn't know about that and whatever. Okay. But yes, I think it's perfectly defensible to say that just appearing in the transcripts or having exchanged emails with someone who seemingly sent a million texts a day is not a crime. Absolutely. But at the same time, it's very clear that the scale of the people who were committing crimes or were at least aware of the crimes that were occurring is larger than the two that have been prosecuted, one who is now dead, allegedly. And given that we live in a time now where there are internet communities that can band together, say it's only 1 in 100 people that read this stuff directly and see that gap. It's not the case that that's just 3 people in your town. It's now going to be the case that that's millions of people in a society like as large as America or Europe that are going to be exchanging stories and ideas and political motivations and be activated around it in a way that is just not able to be swept under the rug in perhaps ways that it could have been in days gone past. It's not simply a case of, the the palace has been involved in a scandal. Well, fortunately, we run the media and we pay off a few journalists, and we'll sweep that under the rug. Like this, the rug is out, and the gap between the coverage of it and the reality is extreme, and the gap between the lack of prosecutions and the extent of the crimes is even more extreme. And there are going to be consequences. As I said at the very top, something's got to give. It's going to be one way or the other. It's either going to be House of Cards, where everything will fall down and there'll be cascading consequences that radiate out as individuals are prosecuted, and they say, well, it wasn't just me, it was them, or whatever it might be, and they do deals, which is, one to watch. Bill and Hillary Clinton are going to be facing questioning in front of a congressional hearing at the end of this month, and that could be a real spicy turning point in all of this. Or it goes the other way, where the legitimacy of all of these systems and the authority in which we place in them just collapses. And I think at the very least that has to happen, or if it isn't already. Because, how can you sit at home and pay your taxes with a straight face? Or, we're seeing old vicars being arrested for standing holding placards or for sending tweets. I think there's 10,000 people or something like that have been charged in the UK for doing illegal social media posts. How can you see that and then see the member of the royal palace is having sex with minors to no consequence? Yes, I think it's the type of thing where you're like, well, fuck that, I'm not paying my taxes anymore, or fuck that, I'm not following the rules of whatever it is. Like, it really, even if it's just at the soft edges, it erodes the legitimacy of your whole society, really. So something's going to have to give. Because so much of this now is in the realm of conspiracy theory, because people don't know the extent of what's happening. You can only, a lot of it, you can only implicate from joining dots or circumstantial evidence or whatever it might be. Even the hard facts that you get from the Department of Justice, okay, they're still just single points of data, and they're not the same as prosecution. So you need to be careful with assuming that alleged crimes are crimes, or assuming that if somebody says they're committing a crime, that they're not just making a joke or whatever it might be. Fair enough. But the quote that I like is, if you don't want to have conspiracy theories, then don't have conspiracy agencies. And I think it's inevitable in the world that you'll have both. But the reason that there are so many conspiracy theories around this, and so many, unhinged ones, but also the reality is also unhinged, to be clear, is because there's no daylight across it. There's no transparent investigations yet into all of it. And until we get that type of stuff, people are just going to spin out and do it all the wrong way, I guess, in terms of law and consequences. And I think, I'm loath to say this because, I feel like you do. I don't have any following, so I'm not creating the problems in the world with this. But I think that you do risk people taking matters into their own hands. Like, if you find out specific instances of people that and it's like ex-Harvard professor, and there's a lot of them, or whatever, and they're just, committing crimes without any accountability, like, you do run the risk of vigilantism. And yeah, so I don't know what the various levels of control, what's the line of how much the state will be acting on this. That's also the minimum that they can get away with for themselves. Because again, also, does anyone have any doubt that this goes all the way to the top of American society at the very least? The whole thing is at the top of American society. There are some very stark accusations against the US president in these documents. It wouldn't be the first time that we've seen American presidents go to great lengths to remove incriminating evidence against themselves or anyone in power. Like, these things are seemingly a feature of these societies. And yes, I think it's at the point where this is a great test for our civilization. Are we better than the times in the past where a feudal lord would just go and commit whatever crimes they wanted against the peasants and face no consequences? Because it very much feels at the moment like no, but we have all these grand structures, and we have grand visions of law and institutions and ideas of equality before justice and things like that, where we at least profess to be better than that. And I think in the next period, we're going to find out whether or not that's true. So anyway, those are my initial thoughts and reflections after reading a few hundred of the Epstein files. I encourage you to go out and explore, if you've got the stomach for it, some of the narratives that are coming out and what the specific implications might be. I haven't gone into those because it's too soon and I'm not expert, but how can anyone be when so much of it is obfuscated? But yes, the final thing I'd say is I recommend you go out and find stuff for yourself, but also, these files don't represent the full extent of what's occurring in this case, but also, just as much as that, this case doesn't represent the full extent of what is occurring generally, where you seemingly have nodes of powerful people going together and doing subversive things and generating a kind of social, implicit or explicit control over each other that leads to accountability that transcends the traditional lines of society's power as it's presented to us. Anyway, My sweetie voice has come over, so I'm going to finish the episode there. Thank you so much for listening. And if you are one who supports the show, thank you so much of my Patreon patrons. Huge shout out to Soph Morris, and apologies to all of you who I've been excluding from the end screen. If you watch it, it's been updated for this episode. I don't forget about you. I just forget about updating my graphic. If you do want to join, head on over to patreon.com/Andrew. And I'm going to put some images of some of the choicer tidbits, nothing horrible. I mean, it's all horrible, but nothing explicit on the Instagram. So follow me at Chris Andrew Podcast, and I'll see you soon. Have a great week.